What is up, YouTube? Welcome to the video. This is Outdoorsful Living. In this video, I'm going to show you how to repack the bearings on my CountyLine 25-ton log splitter. If you do not have a CountyLine log splitter, the methods that I'm going to show you today will probably apply for your make and model as well. The last video that I have on this channel was actually shot after this video. In that video, I traveled 50 minutes over to a friend's house to help split a bunch of wood. This video was shot prior. Okay, let's get into this. So some of the tools I'm going to use is a car jack. I've got some shop rags, some nitrile gloves. I'm going to be using this Lisle handy packer bearing packer. I'll talk more about that later. I've got a couple different containers for water and also for purple power, which is a degreaser I'm going to be using. I've got just a regular brush, some channel locks, a mallet, hammer, flathead screwdriver. The grease that I'm going to be using is Valvoline Crimson multi-purpose grease. And then I just have a regular grease gun. The first thing I'm going to do is just use the jack to get the tire off the ground. Next, I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and I'm going to start to gently pry the dust cap off the wheel. And all that I'm doing here is just trying to pry it a little bit, and then I'm rotating the tire and the cap. Once I have a little bit of a gap, I'm going to use the claw on a claw hammer to pry that off. There's other ways you can do this. Some people will use channel locks and other things. This is just the way that I usually do it, and I find that I don't damage anything. Next, I'm using a pair of channel locks to straighten out the cotter pin so that I can pull it out. Sorry if I'm blocking your angle right now a little bit. Once I have it straightened out, I just lightly tap on the cotter pin, start to get it up, and then I'm able to grab the end of it and then wiggle it out. The cotter pin is what keeps the castle nut in place. Now I'm going to loosen up the castle nut. It's not on very tight. Once you get past that initial turn, you should be able to turn the rest off by hand. Okay, now that the castle nut is off, we're going to gently pull the tire off, and we're going to catch that bearing so it doesn't hit the ground. There's the bearing, and there's also a washer with that bearing. Now we're going to slide the wheel the rest of the way off. As you can see here, I didn't have quite enough room, so I'm going to jack this up a little bit more. Okay, the wheel is off. There is an inner bearing and a seal. The seal is that bronze thing that you can see on the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the tire on a piece of wood so it's propped up just a little bit. Now I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and a mallet, and I'm going to lightly tap on the back of the bearing. And I'm going to switch from the left side to the right side until the bearing and the seal pop out. As you can see, the bearing and the seal have popped out. Something I wanted to note, since I got this splitter about 2 years ago, I did repack the bearings with grease one other time. Since I've done that, the splitter's only been pulled down the road one time, and all the other movements were just inside of my yard. What I will say is the bearings from the manufacturer did come with grease. However, there was not very much grease in there. So I do recommend that if you have a splitter, especially if it is a new one or a used one, that you check your bearings and consider repacking them. Before I repack these bearings, I'm first going to clean them up a little bit. So that's the outer bearing and the washer. Right now I'm just taking a quick look at the bearings to make sure that they're in good shape, which they are. This is the inner bearing and the seal. The next few steps I'm going to show you can have a lot of variation in the way that they're done. This is just the way that I'm doing this. There are other ways of doing this that are just fine as well. What I like to do is just take a shop rag first and just try to get as much of the grease off as I can before I start to get into the other methods. Nitrile gloves do help, as well as the handy packer. with reducing a little bit of the mess, but anytime you're working with grease, it is a messy job. Just take your time, and I try to focus more on keeping grease off of my clothes rather than myself. Next, I'm going to take some of the purple power and I'm going to put it into a container. You can use other things other than purple power. This is just what I had on hand, but I do find that it works pretty well. Now I'm going to drop the bearings into the purple power and let them soak for a little bit. I'm also going to drop the washer in there as well as the seal. Now the seal, I prefer not to allow it to be in the purple power too much because there is some rubber on that seal and I don't want that to degrade at all. I'm going to speed the video up here. What I'm doing right now is I'm wiping that off, and then I'm going to go fill this cup up with some fresh water, and then I'm going to hook my compressor up with an air gun so that I can blow all of these parts out with both the grease, and then I want to also make sure that I completely get all that purple power out of the bearings before I put the new grease in. I do like using a degreaser to get the old grease out prior to getting the new grease in, but I also do not want that degreaser to degrade my new grease once I have it in. Now I'm going to start using the brush to clean out all the old grease. Again, I'm just looking to get all of that old grease out before I get the new grease in. I don't like to cross-contaminate the old with the new. So you're going to see me work on all these pieces. Right now I'm working on the seal. I'm just taking my time and going through everything until it's all clean. In order to make sure that the purple power is off the parts whenever I'm done, I'm going to drop them into that container with the clean water, as you can see here. And then I'm also going to use a shop rag to help with getting the old grease off if there's any remaining, and then getting that moisture off. Now I'm using the air gun again to just get the last of the purple power and the water off of that seal. Now I'm cleaning off that washer. This is the same process that I used for the seal. Alright, while I let the bearings soak just a little while longer, I'm going to start to unpack this Lisle Handy Packer bearing packer. As you can see, it comes with a nice little instruction book on how to use it. It's very simple to use. I got this packer probably 2 years ago at a yard sale. It was new in the package, and this will be the second time I've used it. The red cover I just removed is like a dust cover, and then the top piece will unscrew and then you can pull it straight out. The bottom piece has holes where the grease comes up, and you push that on the top piece. On the top of there is a brass grease zerk that you can fill this up with. You can also pull that white piece out and then just fill that manually by hand. I will say, if you are going to pack this, especially with a manual grease gun like I have, it does take a while. There was some grease left over from the last time that I used it. I just wanted to add a little bit more grease, enough grease that I thought would be good for these 4 bearings. Now, I will say, you don't have to have this tool in order to do this job. There is nothing wrong with packing bearings by hand. That is what I did for a long time. And if you're interested in that, there are plenty of YouTube videos on how to do that. Okay, now I'm just kind of putting this back together with the dust cap and off to the side. And now I'm going to pull the bearings out and start to go through these. I'm going to use the same process that I did before with the bearings. It's going to take just a little bit more time to get into all the different crevices. It's a little hard to see on the camera view here, but as I'm doing this, I am just paying attention to basically the old grease. And as I see it come off, I will occasionally dip it back into the purple power, and then I'll use the brush some more and just continue going until pretty much the grease is all gone. Pretty much once I'm happy with the progress that I've made, I'm going to dip them one last time into that clean water, and then I'm going to use the rag to start cleaning up as much of the water and any remaining grease that I have. Like I said earlier, just take your time with the process. I still had a good bit of grease on there, so I'm just going back through this one more time with the purple power, the brush, and then the water. Okay, now I'm going to use the air gun from the compressor, and I'm going to go around the edge of the bearing down where the rollers are. And as I'm doing this, especially with the first time around, it pushes a lot of leftover grease back out. So I'm just basically continuing the process some more with the brush, the purple power, and I think you get the idea. Just keep working at it until you're not seeing any remaining grease come out, and all of the water is also blown out as well. You want this to be clean and dry before you repack. I'm going to speed the video up again. As you can see here, I'm still working on that first bearing, and then once I'm happy with that, I will repeat the process with the second bearing until that is clean and ready for repacking. Okay, these are now up to my spec, so now it's time to repack. I'm going to take that dust cover back off that Lisle packer. What I'm going to do is take the narrower part of the bearing and point that downward, center it around that pin, and then I will put that top piece back on and then push down until I see grease come up through the bearing, through all the rollers, and I know that it's been fully packed. Okay, you can see around the upper brim of that bearing, around all the rollers, grease has come out. I'm going to now remove that bearing from the packer, and I'm going to do the same process for the second one. So narrow end down, center it, put the top piece back on, and then push down until you see grease come out of all the rollers. Okay, now I'm going to take this bearing out, and I'm going to use some additional grease around the outer edges of the bearing as well as inside of it. Basically just smear grease around until everything's nice and coated. You know that the inside's already properly packed. Now I'm just trying to get the outside as well as the inner part that will go on the axle covered with a good amount of grease. As I already said, you don't need that bearing packing tool to do this, but it does do a very nice job, and pretty much once I used it one time, I decided that this will be my new method moving forward on packing bearings. Okay, next I'm just going to take a rag and I'm going to remove the remaining old grease off of the axle as well as on the inner parts of the wheel. Now I'm going to take some new grease and put that back on the axle as well as on the inner parts of the wheel, and just get that spread around until it's nice and coated. Okay, now I'm just going to take the inner bearing, place that back into the wheel, and then I'm going to place the seal over the end. I'm going to use this mallet to lightly tap this in until it's flush the entire way around. If you don't have a mallet like this, you could use a piece of 2x4 and then use a hammer to tap the wood. That way you're not directly tapping on the seal with the hammer and potentially damaging it. Now we're going to slide the wheel back onto the axle. And then we're going to insert the outer bearing back into the wheel. And we'll slide the washer on the outside of the bearing. Next, the castle nut will go back on. We'll thread that on by hand. Once it starts to get tight by hand, I'll take the channel locks and I'm going to tighten it down until it's tight, and then I back it off just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to take the cotter pin. I'm going to get that through the hole on the end of the axle inside of the castle nut. I'll gently tap that through, and I'm going to use the channel locks to bend that back up. And as you can see, I also tap on it just to get them bent over. Once that's in place, I'll take the dust cap and the mallet again, and I just lightly tap on that dust cap as I'm slowly moving the wheel around to make sure it's sealed the entire way around. And that's it. Okay, now we're just going to repeat the same process for the other side. I do want to note that it is important that you do this process, especially if you are going to be pulling the splitter down the road. Typically for a trailer, they say that bearings should be repacked once a year, or I believe it's every 10,000 miles. Don't quote me on the miles exactly. But keep in mind, the wheels on these splitters are much smaller than the wheels on your vehicle. So let's just say the wheels are half the diameter of your vehicle. The way that I see it is, if we're traveling 45 miles an hour, which is the max speed for most of these splitters, the splitter's wheels are basically going 90 miles an hour since they're half the diameter of a regular vehicle tire. I wanted to add that the last video that I have on the channel prior to this is about tips on hauling a log splitter down the road. Now, in that video, I pulled the log splitter about 50 minutes to a friend's house. Pulling a log splitter is not a difficult thing to do, but there are some important things that you need to know and understand before you tow one down the road. If you haven't already, check that video out. I've got some pretty good tips in that on towing a log splitter. I hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. This is still a small channel, so every subscription helps. If you do have any questions, feedback, or comments, please put them in the comment bar below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I do appreciate all feedback. A lot of times the feedback that I get does also help me in learning how to do something better as well, so I do appreciate that. Thank you for stopping by, and I hope you come back again.